The Curse of Endless Rain. In the northeastern state of Maine, there lay a small and isolated town called Bramblewood, constantly plagued by torrential rains and storms. These never-ending rains were seen as a sign of a sinister curse by the townspeople. Anyone who stepped into this town seemed to fall under the curse's spell and could never leave. Claire Thompson had to return to Bramblewood after the sudden death of her grandmother. Her grandmother had left her the eerie and long-abandoned Ravenswood house, located in the heart of the town. Claire had not set foot in this town since her childhood, and only had bad memories associated with it. As she entered the town, the incessant sound of raindrops and the dark clouds in the sky sent shivers down Claire's spine. When she arrived at Ravenswood House, the large, dark structure greeted her with its foreboding presence. Claire had to face the idea of staying in this mansion alone. When she stepped inside the mansion, the damp smell and cold air raised goosebumps on Claire's skin. The creaking of old wooden floors and the sound of rain echoing through the walls created a dismal atmosphere. Claire settled into her grandmother's old room to spend the first night. Sleeping through the night was nearly impossible. Claire was disturbed by the constant whispers she heard and the silhouettes moving among the shadows. The intensity of the rain and the storm, reverberating inside the house, created a terrifying symphony. Claire had to stay awake until dawn. In the morning, Claire decided to explore the mansion. As she wandered among the old belongings and dusty furniture, she found an old diary that belonged to her grandmother. The diary contained pages detailing her grandmother's frightening experiences from her youth. Claire learned that her grandmother had been harassed by a cult that performed dark rituals around the town. At this time, Claire's childhood friend, Jake, decided to visit her upon learning she was in town. Jake wanted to help Claire, and together, they began to follow the clues left by her grandmother to track down this cult. Claire and Jake went to the town library to access old newspaper archives and town records. They discovered that many people had disappeared on stormy nights years ago and were never seen again. These disappearances were linked to horrifying events in which Claire's grandmother's name was also mentioned. When they returned, Claire discovered a hidden compartment in her grandmother's room. In this compartment, they found books describing the cult's symbols and ancient dark rituals. Claire realized she needed to uncover the truth behind these rituals and the curse. However, strange events began to occur in the house. Shadows moved, and whispers could be heard everywhere. Claire and Jake discovered that the cult was still active and hiding somewhere around the town. The leader of this cult was Marcus, an old friend of her grandmother, who had now become a dark priest. Marcus maintained the curse by offering sacrifices from the townspeople to dark forces. One stormy night, Claire and Jake tracked the cult to a hidden cave outside the town where they were performing a secret ceremony. To end the curse, they had to confront the dark forces. However, this meant putting their lives in danger. Claire and Jake confronted Marcus and the cult members in the dark cave. The storm's intensity and the terrifying atmosphere created by the dark rituals heightened the tension. Claire used a talisman left by her grandmother to weaken Marcus's power. After a long and arduous battle, Claire and Jake managed to defeat Marcus and the other cult members. During this process, Claire felt that her grandmother's spirit had finally found peace and that the curse had ended. The storm finally ceased, and the town found peace for the first time in years. With the relief of ending the curse and bringing peace to her grandmother's spirit, Claire decided to start a new life in Ravenswood House. The town had come back to life after years, and Claire was making a fresh start free from the shadows of the past. However, with every raindrop and every whisper of the wind, Claire felt the traces of the past and knew that Ravenswood House was still a house of secrets. As she made a new beginning, the dark shadows of the past and the legacy left by her grandmother would never leave her. As Claire tried to adjust to her new life, one morning she found a mysterious letter slip under her door. The letter had no sender's name, but its contents were quite chilling. It stated that her grandmother's curse had not been completely lifted, and that dark forces were still lurking around the town. As Claire tried to figure out who the letter was from, she noticed a symbol at the bottom of the page. It was one of the symbols used by the cult. After receiving the letter, Claire and Jake decided to delve back into the town's history and investigate the remnants of the cult. They soon noticed that people in the town were starting to go missing again. Realizing that their old enemies had returned, they understood that Marcus had not been completely destroyed and that his followers were still active. One evening, during a severe storm, they were visited by a mysterious guest who knocked on their door. This person was Eleanor, an old friend of her grandmother who had left the town years ago. Eleanor had more information about her grandmother's past and told Claire about the origins of the curse. She explained that Marcus's spirit was still bound to the town and that a final ritual was needed to completely destroy him. Claire, Jake, and Eleanor began preparations for the final ritual. By studying old books and notes left by her grandmother, they learned the details of the ritual that would completely obliterate Marcus's spirit. However, they knew this ritual was extremely dangerous and that if they failed, the curse could become even stronger. On the night of the ritual, the most violent storm yet hit the town. Claire, Jake, and Eleanor went to an old chapel outside the town, known as the epicenter of the dark forces. There, they completed all the preparations for the ritual and summoned Marcus's spirit. During the ritual, as the storm raged with full force, Marcus's spirit appeared. Claire tried to weaken Marcus using her grandmother's talisman, but his spirit was very strong. While Jake and Eleanor recited the necessary incantations to complete the ritual, Claire fought against Marcus's spirit with all her might. Finally, when the ritual was complete, Marcus's spirit disappeared in a massive explosion inside the chapel. The storm suddenly stopped, and the town calmed. Claire, Jake, and Eleanor walked out of the chapel with a great sense of relief. They believed the curse had ended, and the town was finally at peace. When Claire and Jake returned to Ravenswood House, they were met with an unexpected sight in front of the house. They noticed that the soil over her grandmother's grave had been freshly dug. Next to the gravestone, they found a note. The note read, "The curse never truly ends. The shadows will always be here." This enigmatic event sent Claire into deep thought. Although the town seemed to be at peace, the dark shadows of the past might still be lurking somewhere. Claire had to continue her new life without knowing if the curse had truly ended and what the future held. The curse of endless rain. Toronto, Canada's largest and busiest city, was always filled with dark memories for Claire Thompson. Years ago, after the mysterious disappearance of her family, she had left Toronto. Now, after receiving a letter, she was forced to return. The letter claimed to have new clues about the night her family disappeared. On a rainy afternoon, Claire arrived in Toronto. The city's modern buildings and bustling streets hadn't changed much since her childhood. However, the dark clouds covering the sky and the never-ending sound of rain deepened the dark feelings within Claire. She decided to go to her family's old house, a place that was both home and a kind of cursed location for her. As Claire got out of her car, the rain intensified. She opened her umbrella and walked slowly toward the house. When she arrived, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. Stepping inside, the cold air and damp smell carried the marks of years gone by. Every corner of the house was covered in a layer of dust and cobwebs. The furniture remained in place, as if her family might return at any moment. As Claire prepared to spend her first night in the old house, memories of her childhood filled her mind. Memories of baking cakes with her mother in the kitchen and her father carrying her upstairs on his back. But these memories quickly faded, replaced by a dark fear. The sound of rain continued throughout the night. Claire decided to stay in her grandmother's old room. In the corner of the room stood an old chest. When she opened it, she found a few belongings of her grandmother and an old diary. As she flipped through the diary, she came across frightening notes written by her grandmother. The shadows will return. You will hear their voices in every raindrop. As Claire read the diary, a cold breeze suddenly swept through the room. She was sure the window had been closed, yet it was now open. The cold air filled the room, making Claire's skin prickle. Throughout the night, she struggled to sleep, constantly hearing whispers and seeing shadows moving, making it difficult for her to rest. In the morning, Claire decided to search the house for more clues. As she rummaged through old cupboards and drawers, she found a diary from the night her family disappeared. In the diary, her mother wrote about seeing strange people around the house and shadows following her. Additionally, an old and worn-out doll that Claire had played with as a child caught her attention. The doll's eyes seemed to be staring at her. As Claire read through the diary, the silence inside the house made her even more uneasy. According to her mother's writings, the strange figures around the house that night seemed to be performing some kind of ritual. Claire tried to understand who these figures were and why they were around their house. At that moment, Claire's childhood friend, Jake, decided to visit her upon learning she was in Toronto. Jake wanted to help Claire, and together they began gathering more information about the night their families disappeared. Jake was happy to see Claire again after so many years, but her introversion and silence increased his concern. Claire and Jake went to Toronto's old library to examine newspaper archives and city records related to the night their families disappeared. They discovered that many people had gone missing that night, and these disappearances had been mysteriously covered up. They also found hints about the existence of a secret society in the city. This society was linked to dark rituals and mysterious events. One newspaper article caught Claire's attention. It included a map showing the last known locations of the missing people, concentrated around Claire's house. Claire felt that there was something behind this coincidence. When they returned, Claire discovered a hidden compartment in the house. In this compartment, she found mysterious symbols and old books. In one of these books, she learned about a ritual that could bring back the souls of the missing people. However, the ritual was extremely dangerous, and if it failed, it could unleash an even greater curse. Claire and Jake decided to track down the secret society. They wandered through old buildings and abandoned structures in the city, trying to find where the society held its meetings. One night, during a severe storm, they learned that the society was gathering in an old monastery outside the city. When they arrived at the monastery, they saw the society performing a dark ritual inside. The society's leader, Marcus, was the one responsible for Claire's family's disappearance. Marcus had managed to increase his power by controlling the souls of Claire's family. Claire and Jake hid outside the monastery and watched the ritual. Marcus and the society members were reciting ancient Latin prayers and moving within a circle filled with symbols. Claire realized that Marcus held a talisman, which was the source of the powers that had caused their family's disappearance. Before confronting Marcus, Claire and Jake began preparing to complete the ritual. Using the prayers and symbols they had learned from the old books, they planned to weaken Marcus's power. However, they were worried about the dangers of the ritual. Claire hoped to weaken Marcus's power by using an old talisman she had found in the house. Jake studied the old books to learn how to perform the ritual correctly. They worked through the night, learning all the necessary details for the ritual's success. On a stormy night, Claire and Jake returned to the old monastery to perform the ritual. Confronting Marcus and the society members, the intensity of the storm and the atmosphere created by the dark ritual heightened the tension. Claire tried to weaken Marcus's power using her grandmother's talisman. When the ritual was completed, Marcus's spirit disappeared in a massive explosion inside the monastery. The storm suddenly stopped, and the city calmed. Claire and Jake walked out of the monastery with a great sense of relief. They saw that Marcus's power was gone, and the society was beginning to disband. However, Claire's feeling of unease persisted. Although the rain and storm in the city seemed to have ended, Claire and Jake knew that the shadows of the past were still lurking somewhere. As they left the monastery, Claire still had many questions in her mind. Had Marcus truly been destroyed? Were all the society members really gone? When Claire and Jake returned to Toronto, they decided to visit the cemetery where Claire's family was buried. When they arrived at the cemetery, Claire was shocked. Her family's graves had been freshly dug, and they found a note next to the headstones. The note read, "The curse never truly ends. The shadows will always be here." This enigmatic event sent Claire into deep thought. Although the city seemed to have found peace, the dark shadows of the past might still be lurking somewhere. Claire had to continue her new life without knowing if the curse had truly ended and what the future held. Claire and Jake decided to stay away from Toronto for a while after what they had experienced. Although Claire didn't want to leave the city where she had spent her childhood, she needed some time to breathe after the traumatic events she had gone through. They decided to go to Jake's family's summer house. There, they could both rest and reevaluate the events they had experienced. When they arrived at the summer house, the sky was clear and the weather was sunny. This was the first time in a long while that Claire and Jake were able to relax. Claire found some peace in the beauty and tranquility of nature. However, she knew she couldn't find true peace without answers to the many questions still lingering in her mind. During their time at the summer house, Claire and Jake evaluated the events they had experienced and the clues they had. Claire decided to review her grandmother's diary once more. She found more details about the frightening events her grandmother had experienced and the shadows. These details helped Claire learn more about Marcus and the society. Claire noticed a note her grandmother had written. "The traces of the past will always be here. It is impossible to erase them, but we can learn to live with them." This note guided Claire in a way. The dark shadows of the past would always be there, but Claire had to learn to live with them. Claire and Jake decided to return to Toronto. They wanted to find out if the city's curse still existed and learn to live with these shadows. When they returned to Toronto, they noticed a change in the atmosphere. The cessation of rain and the improvement in weather indicated that the city was beginning to normalize. However, the unease within Claire and Jake persisted. As they walked through the city, they felt they could still see traces of shadows in the streets and buildings. Claire, remembering what her grandmother had written in her diary, decided to face these shadows and learn to live with them. Claire and Jake decided to perform the final ritual written in her grandmother's diary. This ritual would completely destroy Marcus's spirit and eliminate the remnants of the curse. They gathered the necessary materials and began preparations in her grandmother's old house. On the night of the ritual, Claire and Jake placed the necessary symbols and talismans inside the house. Claire recited the prayers her grandmother had taught her, summoning Marcus's spirit. Jake followed the steps necessary for the ritual's success. At the end of the ritual, a powerful energy explosion occurred inside the house. Claire and Jake felt that Marcus's spirit had been completely destroyed. The atmosphere in the house suddenly changed, as if the entire curse had been lifted. Claire thought her grandmother's spirit had found peace and that the curse had ended. Claire and Jake stayed in the house for a while after the ritual. The peace and silence inside the house helped them overcome their traumas. Claire reevaluated her grandmother's legacy and her life in Toronto. She decided to make a fresh start in this city. As Claire and Jake built a new life in Toronto, They knew they could never completely erase the traces of the past. However, they had learned to live with these traces. With every raindrop and every whisper of the wind, they felt the shadows of the past. But these shadows no longer frightened them. Claire remembered the final note in her grandmother's diary. The traces of the past will always be here. We must learn to live with them. This note had become a kind of guide for Claire. The dark shadows of the past would always be there, but Claire and Jake had learned to live with them. In the end, Toronto, once filled with the shadows of the past for Claire and Jake, had become a symbol of new beginnings and hope. Rainy nights and dark shadows were now just memories in their lives. Looking to the future with hope, Claire and Jake continued to build a new life in Toronto, behind the endless rain. Our story begins on a stormy autumn night in the northeastern state of Maine, where constant heavy rains dominate. Jennifer was forced to come to the old mansion she inherited after the mysterious death of her great-aunt Martha, whom she hadn't seen in years. On a stormy evening, when Jennifer's car reached the old and eerie mansion seemingly lost in the depths of the forest outside the town, an indescribable fear gripped her. As she entered the mansion, darkness had fallen and the sound of raindrops filled the entire house. The creaking of the old wooden floors and the echoes of the storm reverberating through the walls made Jennifer uneasy. The thought of spending the night alone here was a chilling reality. Jennifer knew very little about the mansion where her great-aunt Martha had lived. She had visited a few times in her childhood, but even then, the house had seemed gloomy and sinister to her. Now this place, which bore the weight of years even more, stood like a darkness trying to pull her in. On her first night in the mansion, Jennifer began to have strange dreams. Whispers mingling with the sound of the storm, silhouettes lost among the shadows, and a constantly recurring scream. When she awoke in a cold sweat, she looked out of her bedroom window. The heavy rain continued, and the trees were bending and swaying under the storm's might. When daylight broke, Jennifer decided to explore the mansion. As she wandered through the old and dusty rooms, she found some belongings and old letters belonging to her great-aunt. One of these letters caught her attention. Martha wrote that she was hiding a terrible secret from someone, and that this secret would be her end. Jennifer began to wonder what this secret could be. Jennifer found a door in the basement of the mansion. This door, unlike the others, was heavily locked. After much effort, she managed to open the door, and the sight that greeted her was horrifying. The basement seemed to bear the traces of a dark ritual. Strange symbols were on the walls, and there were dried bloodstains on the floor. Jennifer realized that her great-aunt had been part of some kind of cult, and that this cult had held terrifying ceremonies. This discovery plunged Jennifer into an even deeper fear. The storm showed no sign of abating, and the restlessness in the mansion grew with each passing hour. Jennifer was determined not to leave until she solved the mystery behind Martha's death. However, this secret was a shadow that threatened her life as well. Jennifer decided to gather more information about her great-aunt's past by going to the town library. While looking through old newspaper archives at the library, she learned that Martha had been linked to the disappearances of many people in the town during her youth. However, no concrete evidence had ever been found, and the events had been covered up. When she returned, she encountered an unexpected visitor at the mansion. Mr. Thompson, the town's former police chief, had come to see Jennifer. Entering the mansion in the midst of the heavy rain and storm, Thompson claimed to know the truth behind Martha's death. Thompson said that Martha had made a pact with a demon, and that as a result of this pact, her soul returned on stormy nights. What Mr. Thompson had told her had shocked Jennifer deeply. The increasing severity of the storm created an increasingly ominous atmosphere inside the house. Following the clues left by her great-aunt Martha, Jennifer realized that the ritual in the basement had not been completed, and this was why her soul could not find peace. With one final act of courage, Jennifer and Mr. Thompson decided to complete the ritual by descending into the basement. However, completing the ritual would also put to rest the souls of those who had disappeared in the past and lift the curse from the mansion. During the ritual, the storm reached its peak. The walls of the house shook, and the sky lit up with lightning. At the last moment, with the completion of the ritual, the dreadful atmosphere inside the house dispersed. The storm suddenly subsided, and silence enveloped everything. Jennifer felt a great sense of relief with the first light of morning. There was now a sense of peace in the mansion. Mr. Thompson thanked Jennifer and left. Jennifer decided to stay in the mansion, feeling the satisfaction of having solved the mystery of her great Aunt Martha. However, before leaving the mansion, Jennifer remembered the last sentence written in a journal she found in Martha's room. "Storms are temporary, but shadows always remain." This sentence echoed in Jennifer's mind, making her think that the storm had not truly ended and that the darkness still lurked somewhere. As Jennifer carried her great Aunt Martha's legacy and secrets, she decided to start a new life in the mansion. However, with every raindrop and every whisper of the wind, the true shadow of the storm would always follow her, and so, that night, which Jennifer would never forget for the rest of her life, was actually a harbinger of a new beginning for her. Under endless rains. In the northwestern state of Washington, amidst constant heavy rains, lay the old and abandoned town of Ravenwood. Rebecca had decided to return to this town, which she had left years ago, to research her family's roots and follow the trail of her missing sister Emily. As she entered the town, the sound of raindrops echoed in her ears, and the abandonment of the town gave her a profound sense of loneliness. In Ravenwood, everything resembled the faded surface of an old photograph. The streets were empty, the houses abandoned, and nature seemed to have draped itself over the town like a shroud. Rebecca walked towards Blackwood House, the old and large mansion where her family had lived years ago. The mansion had turned into a ruin, eroded by rain and time, but Rebecca felt there was a secret hidden here. When Rebecca stepped into Blackwood House, the interior was dark and eerie. The sound of raindrops on the roof and windows created a somber atmosphere inside the house. Rebecca knew that no one had lived here for many years, but she felt as though something was moving inside. The first night was a complete nightmare for Rebecca. As she wandered among the old furniture, she felt an abrupt chill. The howls of the wind carrying into the house and the movements among the shadows made her hair stand on end. In one of the rooms, she found an old diary belonging to Emily from the night she disappeared. In the diary, Emily wrote that something was watching her, and she heard whispering voices in the darkness. Rebecca decided to gather more information about the town's past at the old Ravenwood Library. The library, like the other buildings, was abandoned, but the shelves were still full of old books and newspaper clippings. Rebecca came across newspaper archives revealing the town's horrifying history. Years ago, a series of disappearances had occurred in the town. People had vanished one by one on rainy nights, never to return. At the center of these disappearances was the Blackwood family. The townspeople claimed that the Blackwood family had made a pact with dark forces, resulting in the town's curse. As Rebecca returned from the library, she encountered Mr. Thompson, one of the town's elderly residents who was still alive. Mr. Thompson told Rebecca he wanted to share everything he knew about her family. He explained that the Blackwood family had made a pact with a demon, and the price of this pact was the town's curse. Rebecca was horrified by this information. Mr. Thompson told her that there was a passage in the basement of Blackwood House that led to another dimension. Rebecca decided to descend into the basement to go to the place where her sister had disappeared and solve this mystery. Gathering her courage, Rebecca went down to the basement of Blackwood House. The basement resembled an old and dark dungeon. There were strange symbols and ancient writings on the walls. Rebecca found the passage Mr. Thompson had described, and when she opened its door, she was paralyzed by what she saw. Beyond the passage was another dimension where the rain never stopped and dark shadows ruled. In this dimension, the souls of the town's missing people were trapped. Rebecca found her sister Emily's soul there and communicated with her. Emily explained that they were held captive by a dark entity responsible for the town's curse. Rebecca decided to confront the dark entity to free Emily's soul and end the town's curse. This entity had emerged as a result of the pact made by the Blackwood family and had taken over Ravenwood. When Rebecca faced the entity in the dimension beyond the passage, she reached the deepest points of fear. The entity tried to take over Rebecca's mind, but Rebecca resisted using the power her family had left her. After a long and arduous battle, Rebecca managed to defeat the entity and close the passage. Emily's soul and the souls of the others who had disappeared were finally at peace. After defeating the dark entity and closing the passage, Rebecca noticed that the rain had lightened when she returned to the town. For the first time in years, Blackwood House and Ravenwood saw sunlight. Rebecca, having ended her family's curse and saved the town, decided to start a new life. However, with every raindrop and every whisper of the wind, Rebecca knew that the shadows of the past still lurked somewhere and that Ravenwood's secrets were not fully unveiled. While making a fresh start, the traces of the past and her family's legacy would never leave Rebecca. And so, the night that Rebecca would never forget for the rest of her life was actually a harbinger of a new beginning for her. Yet this beginning was filled with the dark shadows of the past, and the secrets of Ravenwood still awaited to be unraveled. Sophia's Dark Night Adventure. It was a rainy evening. The streets were empty, and the raindrops were rustling outside. The steps echoing on the wet ground of the streets filled the air with an eerie silence. Sophia, a young woman living alone, didn't like going out in such weather. However, that night she had to go out for a friend's birthday party. Arriving at the party drenched, Sophia was relieved by her friends' cheerful voices. But as the night progressed, strange things started happening. The lamps suddenly went out, and strange shadows moved on the walls. Sophia's heart began to race. The people around her began to act bizarrely without realizing it. Suddenly, the party took on a terrifying atmosphere. A mirror in the living room briefly reflected a different face back at Sophia. At that moment, Sophia felt a hand on her shoulder. Looking around with eyes full of fear, she noticed that the people around her had become semi-transparent. Sounds from one side, shadows from the other. Sophia wanted to leave as soon as possible. However, the house door suddenly locked. As Sophia looked around in panic, she saw a ghost approaching her. Its eyes were bloodshot, and its face expressionless. Sophia's fear reached its peak. Just then, a beam of light suddenly appeared around her. A voice said, "Sophia, come and learn the secret before you flee." When Sophia opened her eyes with fear, she was in her bedroom. She was drenched in sweat, and her heart was still racing. At that moment, she realized that the rain was still pouring down hard. That night, Sophia couldn't sleep at all. The mysterious events in her dream were still on her mind. Were they real, or was it just a dream? Sophia let herself ponder these questions through the night and stayed awake until morning. A few days passed, and Sophia tried to forget that frightening night. However, strange occurrences at home did not cease. The sudden flickering of the lights, the appearance of mysterious shadows, and the sounds increased Sophia's fear. One night, while Sophia was lying in bed, she heard a voice. The slightly trembling voice said, "Sophia, if you want to learn the secret, come to me." Sophia's curiosity overcame her fear, and she decided to follow the direction of the voice. As she walked through the dark rooms of the house, she encountered strange shadows emerging from the walls and unexpected sounds. Finally, she arrived at the door from which the voice came. Without hesitation, she opened the door and stepped inside. In front of her stood an old mirror. In the reflected image of the mirror, a woman appeared. The woman's face seemed familiar. It reminded Sophia of something. The woman began to speak mysteriously and revealed a secret hidden in Sophia's family history. Sophia learned, with great astonishment, that a mysterious power and curse inherited from her mother had been passed down to her. This power, caused by an injustice in the past, had haunted her family and now had reached Sophia. As Sophia's heart continued to race, the woman told her that she had to make a choice. She could either accept the power and end her family's curse, or flee and succumb to the dark force's oppression. Summoning her inner courage, Sophia decided to accept the power. She was determined to fulfill her duty and end her family's curse. With this decision, she was resolved to uncover the truth behind the terrifying events she had experienced that night. And so, with the magical power inherited from her family's past, Sophia prepared to fight against the dark forces, leaving behind the fear-filled night she had lived through. Perhaps this was a harbinger of a new beginning, and Sophia's life would never be the same again. The Curse in the Dark Forest. Jane, Rudy, Gabriel, and Samuel were 4 close friends who had known each other for years. Adventurous and brave, these 4 young people decided to camp in a deserted forest. They all had a common passion: nature and adventure. This time, they set out to realize the camping trip they had been planning for a long time. As they ventured deep into the forest, the silence of the place enchanted them. The chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, and the whispering wind made them feel embraced by nature. Jane, designated as the group leader, was responsible for choosing the campsite. After walking for a while, they found a suitable spot and started setting up their tents. As they settled into their tents, dark clouds suddenly began to appear in the sky. At first, they didn't pay much attention, but when they started hearing intense thunder a short while later, they became uneasy. The sky was suddenly covered by dark clouds, and raindrops began to fall rapidly on the ground. "This is really unexpected," Gabriel murmured anxiously. They quickly lit their campfire and decided to get into the tents to avoid getting wet. However, the rain was intensifying, and within about 30 minutes, the entire forest was flooded. Trapped inside their tents, the young people helplessly watched the storm outside. The lightning flashing in the sky and the continuous thunder terrified the young people. Jane tried to gather her courage and called out to the others, "This is just a storm, don't worry. There's nothing to be afraid of," she said with a trembling voice. However, Samuel's eyes were full of worry. "I feel something is wrong here. This isn't just a storm," he said. When they turned on the lights inside their tents, they started hearing strange noises around them. The weird clicking and rustling sounds coming from a distance increased the fear inside the young people. Jane and the others clung tightly to their tents to protect themselves from the dangers outside. But unfortunately, this shelter wouldn't save them. Suddenly, a scream was heard, followed by the sound of something strange hitting the walls of the tent. The young people exchanged bewildered looks, trying to figure out if it was a creature screaming. Did you hear that?" Rudy said with a trembling voice. Jane slowly replied, "Yes, I heard it. But maybe it was just an animal. Don't worry." However, a few minutes later, a strange creature's silhouette appeared on the roof of the tent and began to reach towards the young people. This creature looked like a giant wolf, but its eyes glowed with a strange light. Jane and the others were frozen with terror. Not knowing what to do, Gabriel, trembling with fear, whispered, "What are we going to do?" "What is this?" Samuel, with a shaky voice, said, Maybe we are facing some kind of monster. It might have come here to hunt us. The wolf creature continued to approach the walls of the tent. Jane tried to gather her courage and said, "Maybe we are hallucinating. Stay calm, don't panic." However, unfortunately, the walls of the tent had weakened to the point where they couldn't withstand the creature's attacks. Cracks started to appear, and the wolf creature continued to advance inside with its terrifying teeth. At that moment, Jane and the others decided to face the dangers outside rather than stay inside the tent. Bravely, they jumped out of the tent and began running in the dark forest. The rain was still pouring heavily, and the thunder was deafening. As the young people continued to run through the forest, they felt the uneasiness and danger around them. It seemed like an invisible darkness was surrounding them. Jane and the others hoped to get out of the dark forest and reach a safe place as soon as possible. But unfortunately, the intricate paths of the forest caused them to get lost. They were trapped among the trees and didn't even realize how far they had gone. For 2 hours, they tried to move forward helplessly, but couldn't find an exit. Suddenly, Rudy was surrounded by a deep hum among the trees. "I feel something is following us here. It's getting closer," he shouted. The others immediately stopped and looked around, and then they noticed the strange figure emerging among the shadows of the trees. A huge shadow was approaching them, reminding them of the wolf creature. Samuel anxiously asked, "What is this? What kind of creatures live in this dark forest?" Jane, gathering as much courage as she could, gave the young people a reassuring look. "Don't be afraid. If we stick together, we can overcome this danger too. Quick, let's run," she said, and led them into the darkness with determination. The young people began to move forward, hiding among the shadows, but unfortunately, they realized that the shadow was not leaving them alone. In the midst of a fear-filled escape, Jane and the others realized that they were cornered. Finally, the shadow figure came in front of them and appeared. However, when they saw that the shadow figure was indeed the wolf creature, they were surprised. But this time, they were face to face with the creature, and there was nowhere to run. The wolf creature, with its furry body and glowing eyes, looked at the young people threateningly. Jane bravely stepped in front of the creature and began to speak. "Who are you? Why are you following us? Do you want to harm us?" she asked, her voice trembling less noticeably. The wolf creature silently stared at the young people for a long time, then began to speak in a deep voice. "I am a victim of a curse. I am trapped in this forest, and only a stranger can save me. I don't want to harm you, but if you don't help me, my curse might affect you too," it said. The young people looked at each other in astonishment. They didn't know what to do with this creature, claiming to be a victim. Jane hesitated for a moment, but then spoke decisively. "We will save you. Guide us and tell us how to break the curse," she said. The wolf creature led the young people on a journey lasting several hours and eventually brought them to an ancient temple. In the temple, it explained how to perform the rescue ritual and helped the young people. When they completed the entire ritual, the wolf creature turned into a beam of light and ascended to the sky. The young people held their breath and watched the surroundings, and suddenly, all the darkness in the forest dispersed. The sun began to shine again, and the silence of the forest returned. Jane and the others, having experienced this extraordinary adventure together, became even closer. They decided that they would be friends forever, bound by the bond of overcoming the fear-filled moments in the forest together. They understood the value of true friendship by facing the fears and dangers hidden inside each of them. Alan's night of terror. Alan had been living a peaceful life in the small town he had known for so long. However, the recent unseasonable heavy rain and hail had started to affect Alan's life negatively. The constant sound of the rain kept him awake at night, filling his ears and unsettling his mind. One night, while returning home under a downpour, Alan's attention was caught by the window of an old house a little further ahead. This old and dilapidated house stood abandoned on the hills outside the town. As Alan wondered what might be inside, he suddenly noticed a light coming from the house. Driven by curiosity, Alan made his way toward the old house, getting soaked by the rain. He gently pushed the door open and stepped inside, feeling a strange calm and silence. As he walked towards one of the rooms, he suddenly felt a cold breath on his neck. Despite being frightened, he showed great courage and continued into the room. Inside the room, there was an atmosphere filled with old and worn-out furniture. A bed covered in dried bloodstains, a half-rotten table, and broken chairs. As Alan looked at this scene, he began to tremble and lost his way. Without understanding what was happening, he saw a figure moving in the corner of the room. Trembling, Alan called out, "Who's there?" but received no response, only a faint whisper from the darkness. Alan felt that this was not a dream and that something truly was there. The mysterious atmosphere deeply affected him emotionally. Suddenly, the room lit up, and he saw a woman sitting on an old chair in the middle of the room. The woman looked at Alan with dark, empty eyes and smiled silently. As Alan tried to understand what the woman wanted, she slowly stood up and approached him. With the woman's approach, Alan felt a deep sense of pity and wanted to run away, but no matter how much he ran, he couldn't escape her. As the woman drew closer, Alan began to feel a profound sense of dread within him. Trembling with fear, Alan could no longer understand what was happening. Everything had become all too real from this point on. The woman began to say something to Alan, but her words did not form sentences. Trying to comprehend, Alan felt as if he were in a nightmare. Suddenly, the room went dark, and Alan found himself in a dark forest. Alone, filled with fear, and unsure of what to do, Alan cried out desperately, but his voice only echoed in the dark forest. As he wandered through the forest, the sky suddenly darkened, and a massive storm broke out above him. The rain and hail continued to pour down on Alan in torrents, leaving him struggling with fear and anxiety. As he ventured deeper into the darkness, a mysterious atmosphere surrounded him. With his heart pounding rapidly with fear, Alan's eyes caught sight of a dilapidated farmhouse standing in the middle of a graveyard. This house had been watching the town with sorrowful eyes for years. Alan decided to uncover the secret of this house in the graveyard. While trying to find his way through the dark and eerie graveyard, a hand suddenly touched Alan's shoulder. Alan screamed in fear and turned to face the ghostly figure in front of him. The ghost, with great sorrow and pain in its eyes, made silent gestures to convey a message to Alan. As Alan tried to interpret the ghost's signs, the surroundings suddenly lit up with a beam of light. This light, rising from the farmhouse in the graveyard, drew Alan toward it. Inside, he found a dark atmosphere filled with old and worn-out furniture. As he slowly moved through the house, he suddenly saw the woman standing before him again. With a mysterious smile, she took a step towards Alan. When Alan looked into her eyes, he felt something slowly awakening within him. The woman began to speak silently, revealing the dark secrets of the town to Alan. As the woman recounted the mysterious and terrifying events of the town's past, Alan's heart began to race. Forced to spend the night in the graveyard, Alan experienced a night filled with ghosts and spirits. The town, filled with ghosts mourning and seeking vengeance, caused Alan to endure a night of terror. As Alan wandered through the graveyard throughout the night, he began to see the ghosts and spirits of old stories with his own eyes. The storm and rain continued through the night, revealing the town's dark secrets, and Alan decided to face these truths. Towards dawn, As the storm slowly subsided, Alan came to the dilapidated farmhouse in the graveyard. Unable to take his eyes off the house, he suddenly realized that the ghosts around him had quietly started to accompany him. Alan, along with these ghosts, set out to uncover the town's dark secrets and confront the past. With the fear-filled experiences of the night behind him, Alan was now determined and brave enough to solve the town's mysteries and bring peace to the spirits. Accompanied by ghosts, Alan walked through the dark streets of the town and suddenly stopped and looked around. He found himself face to face with a mysterious figure. The figure, half human, half supernatural, stood before him, filling Alan with a shiver. The mysterious figure slowly approached Alan and began to speak in a deep voice. "We've been waiting for you, Alan. There's a reason you need to be here," it said, as the ghost silently circled around the figure. Alan, staring in amazement at the figure, tried to understand why he was here and what he needed to do. The figure explained to Alan the dark secrets of the town and what needed to be done to bring peace to the spirits, while Alan's courage and determination grew stronger, emphasizing that the town's curse must end by traveling through the graveyard, farmhouse, and every corner of the town, helping to bring peace to the spirits. The figure guided Alan. Alan, resolutely setting out to fulfill his mission, gathered the ghosts from every corner of the town and brought peace to their spirits. Accompanied by the storm and rain, this mysterious journey continued throughout the night, and finally, Alan witnessed the breaking of the town's curse. As dawn broke and Alan walked through the peaceful streets of the town, he was now free from fear and anxiety. By facing the dark experiences of the night and helping the spirits find peace with his courage and determination, he had broken the town's curse. Alan decided to live a life free from fear and anxiety, never forgetting this mysterious night. Not only had he solved the town's dark secrets, but he had also helped the spirits find peace. Thus, by bravely overcoming the fear-filled night and shedding light on the town's mysteries, Alan had illuminated the darkness. The town, now free from the ghosts and the unrest of the spirits, had attained an atmosphere of peace and tranquility. Alan, never forgetting this mysterious night, moved forward into new adventures, stronger and more mature from the lessons learned. And so, the enigmatic story of Alan, which began with a night of terror and ended with courage and determination, came to a close. The fear brought by the rain. Once upon a time, in a small village called Nardir in western Turkey, there was a forest that everyone spoke of with fear. This forest was known as Karakuyu Forest, and it was said that those who entered never returned. The elders of the village would tell stories about the strange noises and the constant rain that came from the forest at night. One day, a young journalist named Ahmet, who had recently moved to the village, heard these stories and became intrigued. He had moved to Nardir to chase mysterious stories like these. Ahmet was determined to uncover the secrets of Karakuyu Forest. The villagers begged him not to go, but Ahmet thought such stories were often exaggerated. One morning, Ahmet prepared all the necessary equipment and set out towards the forest. The sky had darkened, and the rain had begun to fall. When he reached the entrance of the forest, a chill ran down his spine. The trees were so dense and tall that they blocked out the sky. As he ventured deeper, the rain intensified. He heard strange whispers coming from the depths of the forest. These sounds were not the natural noises created by the wind among the trees. It was as if someone was trying to tell him something. After a while, Ahmet reached a clearing. In the center of the clearing, there was a large well. As he approached the edge of the well, the murmurs from within became more distinct. The combination of the rain's sound and these murmurs made Ahmet's hair stand on end. He decided to look into the well with his flashlight. As the light penetrated the depths of the well, he encountered a pair of glowing eyes. These eyes belonged to a terrifying creature, not human. Suddenly, Ahmet felt a coldness behind him. When he turned, he saw a white silhouette approaching him. This was one of the ghosts the villagers had spoken of. The ghost looked into Ahmet's eyes and whispered. "You shouldn't have come here." Ahmet felt this whisper echoing inside his mind. In fear, Ahmet took a step back and tried to run out of the forest. However, he lost his way within the forest. The trees blocked his path, and the rain grew heavier. The forest became darker and more frightening. Soaked and exhausted from the rain, Ahmet collapsed at the base of a tree and fell asleep. When he awoke, he found one of the village elders, Hak Mehmet, beside him. Hak Mehmet woke Ahmet and said, "I knew I would find you here." Hak Mehmet took Ahmet back to the village and explained that the forest was cursed and that the beings within should not be disturbed. After this experience, Ahmet never spoke about Karakuyu Forest again. However, one day, he found a package at his door. When he opened it, he discovered an old notebook and several old photographs. The photos depicted people who had previously disappeared in Karakuyu Forest. The writings in the notebook sent chills down Ahmet's spine. They contained detailed information about the curse of the forest and the beings living there. On the last page, his own name was written, along with a message, "Return to learn the truth." As Ahmet delved into the notebook to decipher the meaning of this message, he realized there were deeper secrets that the villagers did not know. That night, the rain intensified again, and Ahmet felt compelled to return to Karakuyu Forest. As he stepped out the door, he saw a shadow under the falling rain. The shadow moved towards the forest and disappeared. With his heart pounding, Ahmet followed this mysterious shadow into the forest. He vanished into the darkness of the night and the rain. From that day on, no one heard from Ahmet again, and a new story was added to the tales of the curse of Karakuyu Forest in Nardir. Ahmet's disappearance once again proved the eerie and terrifying nature of the forest. The fear brought by the rain deepened the forest's secrets even further. The night of the storm, the fear brought by rain and hurricane. Once upon a time, in a small and peaceful village called Ahinkaya on the Aegean coast of Turkey, there was a terrifying legend. Villagers told stories about the severe storms and hurricanes that especially hit the village during the winter months. It was believed that these hurricanes came from Karakaya Hill, located on the outskirts of the village. One night, as meteorologists reported, a major hurricane was approaching the village. The villagers retreated to their homes, tightly closing their doors and windows. However, one of the village's young men, Meet, was determined to uncover the mystery of this storm. Meet wanted to go to the heart of the storm and reveal its secrets. Meet prepared all the necessary equipment and set out just before the storm began. The sky had darkened, the wind had intensified, and the rain had started to fall. As he moved towards Karakaya Hill, he began to feel the immense power of the hurricane. Trees were bending, and the howling wind filled his ears. The rain was pouring down as if from the heavens, with each drop hitting the ground like a hammer. When Meet reached Karakaya Hill, he had strangely arrived at the most intense point of the storm. At the top of the hill, there was an old stone cabin. The cabin was an abandoned structure that no one had visited for years. However, Meet saw a light in one of the cabin's windows. He entered in astonishment and saw an old man sitting with an ancient book in his hand. The man was calm, as if he had been expecting Meet's arrival. "Welcome, son," said the old man. "Do you want to learn the secret of this storm?" Meet, both fearful and determined, nodded. The old man opened the book and began to explain. "This hurricane and rain are the curse of Karakaya Hill. Centuries ago, a great tragedy occurred here. The villagers accused an innocent family living here of witchcraft and killed them. The spirits of the family return every year with this hurricane and rain to take their revenge. Meat froze upon hearing this story. Is there no way to stop this curse? He asked. The old man took a deep breath and said, however, at the place where the curse began, right here in this cabin, a ritual must be performed to bring peace to the family. Doing this requires great courage and sacrifice. Meat decided to perform this ritual. The old man gave him the necessary instructions and provided the materials needed for the ritual. In the heart of the storm, amid the terror of rain and wind, Meat performed the ritual. The words blended into the night, competing with the howl of the hurricane. Suddenly, everything stopped. The wind ceased, the rain halted, and a deadly silence descended. Breathing deeply, Meat realized that the ritual had been successful. The old man looked at him with gratitude and said, "Now this curse is ended." When Meat returned to the village, the villagers listened to his story with amazement and gratitude. From then on, the storms and hurricanes from Karakaya Hill no longer troubled the village. However, they would never forget that night and what had transpired. Meat, throughout his life, would recall this experience, learning how powerful courage and sacrifice could be. This story continued to be told for generations in the village of Ahinkaya, becoming a legend etched in memory, where the fear of stormy nights was vanquished by the bravery of a hero. Thank you for listening.